Chapter 1: The Forgotten Son. The first time Lucas Miller realized he was invisible, he was 9 years old. It was Ethan's 7th birthday, and the living room in their Sacramento home was packed with balloons, streamers, cupcakes decorated with blue and silver frosting, and the unmistakable energy of excitement. Everyone, family, friends, even neighbors, had shown up to celebrate the golden child of the Miller family. Lucas had worn his favorite red t-shirt, hoping someone would notice he had gotten his first A in math that week. He had folded the test paper and placed it carefully in his jeans pocket, thinking maybe, just maybe, his parents would stick it on the fridge like they did with Ethan's drawings. But no one asked about school. No one looked at him long enough to realize he was trying to speak. His mother was too busy cutting slices of Ethan's custom robot cake. His father was outside grilling hot dogs, laughing as Ethan showed off his new skateboard. Lucas just stood there on the edge of the crowd, feeling like a piece of furniture no one noticed had been moved. And that was the day something dark and silent began to grow inside him. 10 years later, not much had changed. Lucas sat at the edge of the kitchen table, watching Ethan from across the room as their mother placed a plate of steaming spaghetti in front of each of them. Ethan, now 17, still had the same smile, bright, effortless, magnetic. The kind of smile that made teachers lean in, that made girls whisper behind lockers, that made relatives beam and say, "You're going places, kid." Lucas was now 20 and still living at home, working part-time at a local auto repair shop and taking community college classes in mechanical engineering. It wasn't glamorous, and he knew that. He wasn't the star. He was the shadow in the background of every family photo, the one whose birthday everyone remembered only when Facebook sent a notification. Ethan made it to the finals in the state science competition, Sarah, their mother, said proudly as she sat down. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at her youngest son. "The school called today. He's presenting in front of a panel next week." Lucas stabbed his spaghetti with his fork. "Cool," he muttered. "He's so talented," Daniel added, lifting his glass of water. "Your mom and I are really proud of you, Ethan." Lucas didn't look up. He didn't need to. He could feel the applause in the air. That invisible curtain that always seemed to rise when Ethan entered a room. Later that evening, Lucas retreated to the garage, his sanctuary. He hunched over an old motorcycle engine he'd been fixing, letting the grease seep into his skin like armor. The only sound was the hum of the small radio on the shelf and the occasional bark from the neighbor's dog. He wasn't angry at Ethan. Not exactly. He was angry at the universe for dealing him a hand he didn't know how to play. Ethan had it all: good looks, perfect grades, charm. And Lucas? Lucas had to fight for every scrap of attention, every ounce of respect. Even when he tried to do something good, it always paled next to Ethan's achievements. And the worst part? Ethan never flaunted it. He never acted superior. He was kind, thoughtful, always offering to help. And that made it even harder to hate him. But still, Lucas tried. The next morning, Lucas left early for work. He tightened the straps on his boots and swung his backpack over his shoulder, ignoring the warm scent of pancakes drifting from the kitchen. Ethan was already at the counter, drizzling syrup over a stack of waffles. "Hey," he said, smiling. "You want some? I made extra." Lucas grabbed a granola bar from the drawer. "Nah, gotta go." "You sure?" "I can pack some." "I said I'm good." The silence that followed was thick. Ethan looked like he wanted to say something more, but Lucas was already halfway out the door. At the auto shop, the hours bled together in a rhythm of grease, tools, and tired engines. Lucas liked the work. It was honest. Machines didn't smile at you just to make you feel small. They either worked, or they didn't. And if they didn't, he could fix them. Unlike himself. During lunch break, Lucas sat outside on the curb, chewing on a sandwich when his phone buzzed. "Mom, did you hear about the showcase at Lincoln High next Friday? Ethan's presenting. Whole family should come." Lucas didn't reply. Instead, he opened the gallery on his phone and scrolled past photos of Ethan holding medals, certificates, flowers. In every one, Ethan's smile lit up the screen. And somewhere in the background, if Lucas was even in the frame, he was blurred, cropped, overlooked. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. He lay on his back, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling, leftovers from when the room was still shared with Ethan. They'd used to make up constellations, laugh until their mother came in and told them to hush. When had it all changed? When had Lucas stopped seeing Ethan as a brother and started seeing him as competition? He rolled over, gripping his pillow tight. He didn't know. But what he did know was that the bitterness had become a habit, one he didn't know how to quit. And somewhere deep down, he wondered if he still could. Chapter 2: Sabotage in Silence. It was raining the day of the Regional Science Fair showcase. The kind of soft, steady drizzle that blurred windows and made the air smell like wet pavement and old leaves. Lucas stood by the window in the living room, sipping black coffee, his work boots muddy from his morning shift. Across the room, Ethan was adjusting his navy blue blazer in the hallway mirror. "You look like you're about to interview for NASA," Lucas muttered, half under his breath. Ethan turned, a grin spreading across his face. "Thanks. That's kind of the goal." Lucas rolled his eyes. Of course it was. Their mother was bustling around the kitchen. He hadn't decided yet. A part of him wanted to skip it, stay home, binge-watch old reruns, and avoid clapping for yet another one of Ethan's triumphs. But another part, smaller and quieter, wanted to go. Maybe not to support Ethan, but to see for himself whether the pedestal his brother stood on was really that high, or just a trick of the family spotlight. "Yeah," he said finally, finishing his coffee. "I'll come." Ethan's eyes lit up. "Awesome. You'll get to see the prototype I've been working on. I even added that torque stabilizer we talked about last month." Lucas blinked. "We talked?" He couldn't remember. Maybe Ethan had mentioned it. Maybe Lucas had grunted in response while elbow-deep in an engine. But that smile, so genuinely excited to share something with his older brother, hit Lucas like a rock to the chest. He looked away. The auditorium at Lincoln High School was packed. Parents, judges, local news cameras. It was a bigger event than Lucas had expected. Posters lined the walls with the names of student finalists. And right at the center, under a banner that read Future of Innovation Showcase, was Ethan Miller's name in bold font. Lucas felt his stomach knot. They walked together toward Ethan's assigned table, where his small mechanical arm prototype sat neatly on a rotating display. It was sleek, surprisingly complex for a high school student's project. Lucas recognized the servo motors, the 3D printed joints, the neural input sensor. It was good. Damn good. "You really built this?" Lucas asked before he could stop himself. Ethan turned to him, a little sheepishly. "Yeah. Took me 3 months. You remember that old robotics kit in the garage? I used some of your spare parts. Hope that's okay." Lucas didn't respond. He just nodded slowly. He remembered that kit. He'd saved for it all summer 2 years ago, when he still thought he might go into robotics. Before life and tuition got in the way, people began crowding around. Judges with clipboards, classmates in awe, even a few girls Lucas had never seen before, all looking at Ethan like he was the second coming of Elon Musk. And then it happened. Lucas saw it, a tiny loose wire, barely noticeable, snaking out from the back of the battery housing. Ethan hadn't clipped it properly. Maybe in his rush to finish setup, he hadn't double-checked. Lucas leaned in closer. If that wire stayed where it was, it could short the circuit. Maybe during the live demonstration. Maybe not. But the risk was there. And in that moment, Lucas froze. This was it. One small flick of his finger just pushed that wire a little more out of place, and Ethan's big moment would fall apart. No trophy. No applause. No spotlight. Just for once, Lucas would get to watch his golden brother stumble. And maybe, just maybe, someone would look at him instead. His hand moved almost automatically. But just before he touched the wire, Ethan turned to him with the most unguarded, hopeful look. "Lucas," he said, lowering his voice, "I'm really glad you're here. I know I've probably annoyed you with all this stuff over the years. But you showing up today means a lot to me. Lucas's hand hovered in the air. He felt like he'd been punched. Ethan wasn't smug. He wasn't bragging. He wasn't even aware of how close Lucas was to sabotaging him. He was just being Ethan. Kind. Naive. Grateful. Lucas quickly pulled his hand back. He tucked the loose wire gently into place and tightened the battery cover. "Don't forget to double-check this panel," he muttered. "One spark and your circuit's toast." Ethan blinked, then smiled wider. "Thanks, man. I totally missed that." Lucas stepped away and swallowed hard. He hated how relief washed over him, relief that he hadn't gone through with it. But more than that, he hated how close he'd come. The showcase went flawlessly. Ethan's robotic arm responded perfectly to his neural glove input, impressing the judges and drawing applause from the crowd. He even got interviewed by the local news. Their mom was glowing. Their dad had tears in his eyes. And Lucas? He stood at the back of the auditorium, hands in his pockets, watching it all unfold. No one clapped for him. No one knew what he'd done or what he hadn't done. But for the first time, Lucas didn't need them to know. Because deep down, he knew something had shifted. Not fully. Not permanently. But enough. Enough to plant a seed of change. Even if no one saw it. Chapter 3. The Girl with the Lavender Scarf. Lucas had always known that Ethan had a following, girls who sent him notes, who giggled when he walked past, who scribbled his name on the corners of their notebooks like a pop star crush. But nothing ever bothered Lucas quite as much as her. Her name was Isabel Chin. She was a senior at Lincoln High, just like Ethan, and volunteered on weekends at the same children's hospital as he did. She wore glasses that always slid slightly down her nose, tucked her dark hair behind one ear when she was thinking, and carried a sketchbook covered in pastel stickers. Lucas met her once, accidentally, when he went to pick Ethan up from the hospital's volunteer office. She was sitting on a bench outside, her lavender scarf fluttering slightly in the breeze. She smiled up at Lucas, mistaking him for Ethan for a second. And even when she realized her error, she didn't recoil. She didn't look awkward. She just laughed softly and said, "You must be his brother. You kind of have the same eyes." Lucas hadn't smiled back. But he remembered the way her voice sounded, soft and clear. He remembered thinking she was the only person who had ever said he looked even remotely like Ethan. And now she was all Ethan talked about. "She's amazing, dude." Ethan gushed one evening at dinner. "We're working on this mural together for the pediatric wing. She draws the outlines, I paint. It's like effortless, you know?" Lucas stabbed at his mashed potatoes. Sarah, their mother, beamed. "Sounds like you two really hit it off. Is she your girlfriend?" Ethan laughed, a little shyly. "Not yet. I don't even know if she thinks of me that way." Lucas bit his tongue. He wanted to say something biting, something cruel, but he stayed silent. Later that night, after Ethan went to bed, Lucas looked Isabel up on Instagram. Her page was filled with art, whimsical illustrations of animals and dreamy cityscapes, poems in the captions. In one post, there was a picture of her and Ethan, both covered in blue paint, laughing in front of a half-finished mural. She looked happy. With him. And that familiar ache returned, burning in Lucas's chest like acid. A week later, Lucas found himself outside the children's hospital, standing by the bench where he first met Isabel. He wasn't entirely sure why he was there. He told himself he was just running errands, just passing by. But when he saw her step outside with her tote bag slung over one shoulder and her scarf wrapped around her neck like a ribbon of spring, his breath caught. She didn't see him at first. He stepped forward. "Isabel?" She turned, surprised. "Oh, Lucas, right?" He nodded. She smiled. "Ethan's not working today. He had a physics review session." Lucas hesitated. "I know. I just was around." She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Do you volunteer too?" Lucas shook his head. "No, I'm not really the volunteer type." There was a pause. She looked at him more closely. "You okay?" Lucas almost laughed. "Why wouldn't I be? You seem like you're carrying something heavy." He looked away. "People always think Ethan is the good one. The kind one. The smart one. And they're right. He is. But sometimes, I wonder what's left for the rest of us. Isabel's expression softened. I don't think kindness is a limited resource, she said quietly. And I don't think Ethan thinks that way either. You don't have to compete with him. Lucas looked at her. Really looked at her. She meant it. There was no condescension, no pity. Just honesty. Maybe, he said. But it doesn't feel that way when he's the one everyone remembers. Isabel tilted her head. I remember you. Those 3 words landed like a thunderclap. Lucas blinked. Why? You looked sad the first time I met you. But not in a cruel way. In a way that made me wonder if anyone ever asked what you needed. No one had ever said that to him. Not even once in his 20 years of life. I should go, he muttered suddenly, backing away. Sorry. I didn't mean to. She smiled. It's okay. Lucas, if you ever want to talk, I'm here. Really? He nodded stiffly and walked away. But something inside him stirred. It wasn't quite hope. But it was no longer bitterness either. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep again. He lay awake, listening to the faint buzz of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the house settling. From down the hall, he heard Ethan's soft laughter as he talked to someone on the phone, probably Isabel. Lucas closed his eyes. He could still feel her words echoing in his mind. I remember you. And somehow, that hurt more than if she had said nothing at all. Because it meant the invisibility he'd always worn like armor wasn't as impenetrable as he'd thought. Maybe someone had seen him. After all. Chapter 4, The Breaking Point. The garage had always been Lucas's refuge. He liked the hum of tools, the satisfying click of socket wrenches, the earthy smell of motor oil and rubber. Out there, no one expected him to smile. No one expected him to live up to someone else's idea of success. He just fixed things. Machines were simple. Predictable. People weren't. Especially not people like Ethan. Lucas was bent over the hood of an old Ford truck when he heard the squeal of bike tires skidding on the driveway. He knew that sound. It was Ethan's mountain bike. The one he used to ride to school and back. He kept his eyes on the engine, wiping his hands on a rag. He wasn't in the mood for small talk. The garage door creaked open. Hey, Ethan said, stepping inside. His hair was a little damp from the drizzle outside. I stopped by Café Juniper on the way home. Brought you a cinnamon roll. Your favorite, right? Lucas didn't look up. You didn't have to. I know. Ethan placed the paper bag on the workbench. But I wanted to. Silence. Lucas kept his back turned, his fingers tightening a bolt that didn't really need tightening. Ethan hesitated before speaking again. So, Isabel said she ran into you the other day. Outside the hospital. Lucas stiffened. She said you seemed thoughtful. Lucas let out a low breath. Is she reporting back to you now? Ethan blinked. No, man. She said she enjoyed talking to you. Lucas dropped the wrench with a loud clang. You know what, Ethan, he said. Voice low but sharp. Not everything in this world has to revolve around you. Not every conversation needs to come back to you. Ethan frowned, confused. I didn't mean. You never mean anything. Do you? Lucas turned, face flushed with years of pent-up frustration. You just exist, and everyone bends around you like you're the sun. I have to earn everything, every bit of attention. Every compliment, and you just walk into a room and they start clapping. Ethan stepped back, visibly startled. Lucas, where is this coming from? Where has it not come from? Lucas snapped. You know how many times Mom forgot my birthday until Facebook reminded her? You know how many awards I've gotten that no one framed? But your every science fair ribbon is in the hallway like it's the freaking Smithsonian. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. And Isabel? Lucas laughed bitterly. Don't pretend like you don't know how I felt when I saw you too. You always get the best of everything. Even the people I barely get to know. You never told me you liked her, Ethan said, finally finding his voice. Because it wouldn't have mattered. She'd still choose you. A painful pause filled the space between them. It wasn't just a moment, it was a fracture that had been growing for years, finally splitting the ground beneath their feet. Ethan looked down. I never asked to be compared to you. I never wanted that. Yeah, well, Lucas muttered, you got it anyway. Lucas turned back to the engine, his chest heaving. Ethan lingered for a moment, then stepped outside, pulling the garage door shut with a soft thud. That night, Lucas didn't come in for dinner. He stayed in the garage until the cold bit through his hoodie. Until his muscles ached from tension, he couldn't work out with a wrench or hammer. He didn't know how to feel. Guilt tugged at him. But so did exhaustion. It was tiring, always holding it in. Always pretending he was okay with being second. But something about the way Ethan had looked at him, that stunned, broken expression, it haunted him. He hadn't seen fear. He'd seen hurt. And for the first time, it wasn't a satisfying kind of power. It just felt empty. The next morning, Lucas found a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. It was a note. Ethan's handwriting. Slanted, quick. I'm sorry if I've made you feel invisible. I never wanted that. I've always looked up to you, even if I didn't say it. I still do. E. Lucas read it twice. Then a third time. His throat felt tight. There were no accusations. No defenses. Just a boy trying to reach his brother across years of silence. Lucas folded the note and placed it in his pocket. He didn't know what to say. But for the first time in years, he knew he wanted to say something. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. Chapter 5. When the music stops. It had been 3 days since Lucas yelled at Ethan in the garage. 3 days since the cinnamon roll went cold and uneaten. 3 days since the letter sat folded in his jacket pocket, edges soft from being opened and read too many times. Lucas hadn't seen much of Ethan since then. Their schedules barely overlapped. Ethan had school and mural work, and Lucas had taken on more hours at the shop, staying late even when there wasn't much to do. He told himself he needed the cash. But truthfully, he needed the space. Silence had always been easier than saying, I don't know how to be your brother. That morning, as sunlight filtered into the garage, Lucas finally sat down on the back step with the note again. He stared at it, the words written in the rushed penmanship of a 17-year-old who never expected to need to say sorry. I've always looked up to you. He shook his head. Liar, he mumbled. But even he didn't believe it anymore. He tucked the note back into his pocket and stood up. Today, he'd meant to go straight to work. But for some reason, as he got into his old Chevy pickup, his hands turned the wheel toward Lincoln High School instead. He wasn't sure what he would do there. Maybe talk to Ethan. Maybe say something. Anything. Ethan wasn't in the classroom. Lucas peeked through the window into the mural hallway and spotted Isabel instead, up on a stepladder, brush in hand, filling in the tail feathers of a giant blue parrot on the wall. She was alone, humming softly. Lucas stepped in. She looked over and smiled. You came back. He nodded, awkward. Hey. He's not here, she said, reading his mind. Ethan had an early appointment. Physical exam, I think. He said you'd probably swing by. Lucas raised an eyebrow. He said that. She nodded, dipping her brush into yellow paint. He's been hoping you would. Lucas leaned against the opposite wall. He shouldn't. Isabel glanced over. Why not? Because I don't deserve it. She put the brush down and looked at him fully. Maybe, maybe not. But you showed up. Sometimes, that's where healing starts. Lucas looked away. There was a long pause. The only sound was the soft dripping of paint. Then Isabel added quietly, you know, the first time Ethan told me about you, he said you could take apart an engine blindfolded. Said you were the smartest person he knew. That you fix things. And people. Lucas scoffed. People? He said you stayed up with him for 3 nights straight when he had the flu. He was 10. Lucas froze. He remembered that. But he'd forgotten Ethan might remember too. Later that day, Lucas pulled into the auto shop. He was early for his shift. So he sat in the truck with the radio off and the windows cracked. The air smelled like fresh asphalt. For a second, he felt like things might change. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over Ethan's name. Then his phone rang. It wasn't Ethan. It was his mom. He hesitated, then answered. Lucas, she breathed. It's Ethan. He's been in an accident. The world froze. What? He managed. Car accident. A delivery van hit him while he was biking home. He's at UC Davis Medical. I'm already on my way. Lucas's heart plummeted to the floor. How bad? His leg, it's broken. They're prepping for surgery. Lucas didn't hang up. He just dropped the phone in the passenger seat and turned the key so hard it almost snapped. He was out of the parking lot in seconds. When Lucas reached the hospital, the sky was already turning the pale gray of late afternoon. He ran into the ER, his breath ragged. His shirt stuck to his back. His mother was pacing by the waiting room, eyes red. He's in surgery, she said, her voice cracking. Compound fracture. They're worried about nerve damage. Lucas sat down hard on the nearest chair, the white tiles swimming in his vision. He couldn't breathe. All the things he'd meant to say. All the moments he'd thrown away. All the bitterness he'd clung to like armor, it was useless now. Worse than useless. It had robbed them both. 3 hours later, a doctor came out. Surgery went well, she said gently. We stabilized the leg with titanium rods. He's going to need months of physical therapy, but he's lucky. No permanent nerve damage. Lucas didn't hear the rest. He just asked, "Can I see him?" The doctor nodded. He's still sedated. But yes. Room 214. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the monitor's gentle glow. Ethan lay on the bed, pale but breathing. His leg wrapped in gauze and elevated. Lucas stepped inside like a trespasser in someone else's life. He sat in the chair beside the bed and stared. Ethan's face was slack. His lips parted slightly. He looked younger somehow, like the little boy Lucas used to tuck in before their parents came home late from work. I should have been a better brother, Lucas whispered. The machine beeped steadily in response. I let my jealousy turn me into someone you didn't deserve. His hands trembled as he reached for Ethan's. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm here now. I won't leave this time. And for the first time in years, the shadow inside Lucas cracked open, just enough to let the light through. Chapter 6. Quiet mornings and heavy steps. The hospital room took on a rhythm of its own. Soft beeping. Slow breaths. The occasional murmur of nurses changing shifts. For the first 24 hours, Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering half-formed words Lucas couldn't understand. Lucas barely slept. He sat by the bed, head tilted against the wall. Fingers curled around the rail as if letting go would send his brother drifting away again. On the second morning, Ethan stirred. Lucas jolted upright. Ethan blinked slowly. His eyes cloudy with painkillers and confusion. Wah. Hey, Lucas said, voice soft. You're okay. You're in the hospital. Ethan winced. My leg. Broken, Lucas said. Surgery went well, though. They said you'll walk again. Eventually. Ethan turned his head slightly. His gaze landed on Lucas, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. You're here, Ethan whispered. Lucas swallowed hard. Of course I'm here. Silence. Then Ethan managed a fragile smile. You look like crap. Lucas laughed, a dry, tired sound that felt strange in his throat. Yeah, well. You try watching over someone who snores in 3 languages. Ethan gave a weak chuckle, then grimaced as the movement tugged at his ribs. Don't move too much, Lucas said. You're held together by duct tape and hospital bills right now. Ethan relaxed, eyes fluttering shut again. Lucas sat back. It was strange, this quietness between them. For years. Lucas had avoided these moments, afraid of what might spill out if they stayed still long enough. But now, in the hush of the hospital, it felt necessary. Like they were finally learning each other's language. By the 3rd day, Ethan was more alert. The pain medication had been reduced, and physical therapy had already begun its brutal introduction. Lucas was there through it all. He fetched water, fluffed pillows, adjusted the bed angles, and even learned how to operate the lift system to help Ethan to the wheelchair. He became a steady presence, silent, dependable, without complaint. The nurses started recognizing him. You're here again, one asked kindly as she changed Ethan's for. Lucas shrugged. He hates hospital food. I brought him a breakfast burrito. The nurse smiled. You're a good brother. Lucas didn't know how to respond to that. He still wasn't sure he was. That afternoon, Lucas sat by the bed, scrolling through articles on post-surgery recovery timelines. He'd even bookmarked some YouTube channels run by physical therapists. Ethan stirred beside him. You don't have to do all this. Lucas looked up. Yeah, I do. Ethan's brows furrowed. Why? Lucas set his phone down. Because I spent years hating you for things you never asked for. Because I thought, if I stayed angry long enough, it would make me matter more. Ethan didn't say anything. Lucas looked at him fully now. I wanted to be seen. Not just by Mom and Dad. By the world. I thought maybe if you stumbled, people would finally look at me. A pause. I almost sabotaged your science fair project. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. I didn't, Lucas added quickly. But I wanted to. Ethan studied him. You didn't have to do that. You could have just told me. Lucas laughed bitterly. Told you what? That every time someone said your name. It felt like they were erasing mine. The words hung in the air. Then Ethan said something Lucas didn't expect. I used to wish I was more like you. Lucas blinked. What? Ethan nodded slowly. You're real. You fix things. You don't care what people think. I always felt like I had to perform, to keep earning everyone's love. You never tried to be someone else. Lucas looked away stunned. He'd built Ethan up in his mind as untouchable, flawless. But now, for the first time, he saw the cracks, the pressure, the loneliness behind the praise. They were both broken. Just in different places. That evening, after Ethan dozed off again, Lucas stepped outside the hospital for the first time all day. The air was cool, tinged with eucalyptus from the trees that lined the medical campus. He sat on a bench under the flickering street lamp and stared at the stars peeking out between clouds. He didn't feel forgiven. But he felt seen. Maybe that was a start. His phone buzzed. A message from Isabel. He told me you're taking care of him. I'm really glad. I knew you would. Lucas stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. After a moment, he typed back. I'm trying. For once, I'm not running. He hit send, then leaned back and looked up at the sky again. Tomorrow would be harder. Physical therapy would be brutal. Ethan would get frustrated. There would be setbacks. Pain. But for the first time, Lucas wasn't afraid of the hard days ahead. He would show up. He would stay. And slowly, step by step, they would rebuild something real. Chapter 7. First steps are the hardest. The house felt different. It wasn't anything big, no new furniture. No new paint, but something had changed in the air. It was quieter, softer. As if the walls themselves had taken a breath after holding tension for too long. Ethan had been discharged 3 days ago. Lucas had cleared out the old game room on the ground floor, setting up a recliner, a walker, and a physical therapy mat they ordered online. He'd even driven to 4 different pharmacies just to find a pair of crutches with foam handles because the standard ones hurt Ethan's underarms. Their mother, Sarah, was still fussing, adjusting pillows, refilling water bottles, reheating soup. But the worry in her eyes wasn't sharp anymore. It had dulled into something tender, watchful. She'd caught Lucas helping Ethan to the bathroom earlier and said, almost in disbelief, "You're so gentle with him." Lucas had just shrugged. "I always was," he said, without thinking. The therapist, Ms. Helena Ruiz, arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. She was small, spry, and moved with the efficiency of someone who didn't waste time on excuses. "First week out of surgery, we go slow," she said, spreading a towel on the mat. "But we do go." Ethan looked pale. "What if it doesn't work?" "It will," she replied simply. "You do the work, the leg follows." Lucas sat nearby, arms crossed, watching as Helena gently helped Ethan adjust his posture. "Start with ankle rotations. 10 left, 10 right." Ethan tried. His foot trembled, barely shifting. Lucas felt his chest tighten. He remembered a time when Ethan could leap down 3 stairs at a time, race across the soccer field without breaking a sweat. Now, he was struggling to move his own foot. It hurt to watch, but he didn't look away. The first week was all micro-movements. Lifting the leg an inch. Holding it. Releasing. Lucas was there for every rep. He counted aloud when Ethan lost track. He encouraged when Ethan's jaw clenched with frustration, and he helped steady him when balance faltered. Ethan, to his credit, didn't give up. But Lucas could see it. Behind the jokes and forced smiles, his brother was scared. One night, after their parents went to bed, Lucas found Ethan sitting in the recliner, staring at the ceiling with blank eyes. "I don't know if I can do this," Ethan said quietly. Lucas pulled up a chair beside him. "You don't have to know. You just have to try." Ethan laughed weakly. "That sounds like something you would have hated hearing." Lucas smirked. "It is." They sat in silence for a while. Then Ethan asked, "Why are you doing all this?" Lucas didn't answer right away. "Because I owe you. Because I was awful. Because I nearly let bitterness destroy us." Instead, he said, "Because I'm your brother. And I'm trying to figure out what that really means." Ethan nodded. "That's enough," he said. As the second week began, small victories started to appear. Ethan could lift his leg a few inches now. He could sit up in bed without help. He moved from wheelchair to crutches for short walks between the kitchen and the hallway. Lucas documented it all: photos, notes, progress markers. He didn't tell anyone. But he'd started a private blog titled Rebuild, Day by Day with Ethan. Not for attention. Just for memory. For something real. He uploaded short entries at night. Day 10. He stood for 5 seconds today, unaided. It was only 5 seconds. But his eyes lit up like he'd won gold. "I almost cried. I didn't. But I almost did." Then came the first fall. Ethan had insisted on trying the stairs with crutches. Lucas was 2 steps behind when Ethan's right crutch slipped on the edge of the carpet. The sound was immediate: wood against metal, a dull thud. And then a sharp cry of pain. Lucas was on the ground beside him in seconds. "Damn it, Ethan," he shouted, fear mixing with fury. "You're not supposed to do stairs yet." "I had to try," Ethan shouted back, eyes brimming with tears, not from pain, but from frustration. "I feel useless, Lucas. Like I'm not even me anymore." Lucas grabbed the crutches and threw them aside. "You think this makes you less? You're here. You're healing. That's enough." Ethan wiped his face with the sleeve of his sweatshirt. "I hate depending on people." "I hated not being someone you could depend on," Lucas said. Silence. Then Ethan nodded. Lucas helped him up, this time with more care than anger. That night, Sarah pulled Lucas aside while Ethan napped. "You've changed," she said softly. Lucas looked down. He could have died. "I spent so much time being jealous of him, and in the end, none of it mattered." Sarah touched his arm. "You're doing good, honey. You're giving him what he needs most, your presence. And that's something he never stopped wanting." Lucas nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. Maybe he wasn't the golden child. But for the first time, he felt like he was becoming the right kind of brother. And that mattered more. Chapter 8. The Hidden Letter. The weather had shifted again. Rain tapped gently on the windows, misting the glass and soaking the backyard in soft gray. Inside, the house was quiet. Ethan was napping after a particularly grueling therapy session. And their parents had gone grocery shopping. Lucas found himself wandering. Not out of boredom, but restlessness. He paced the hallway, stopped by old framed pictures on the wall, photos of birthdays, school plays, vacations at Lake Tahoe. In most of them, Ethan's face glowed center frame, all charm and sunshine. Lucas was there too, usually on the edge, off to the side, arms crossed, half smiling. He paused in front of one photo, their 10th and 7th birthday, celebrated together. Ethan was wearing a paper crown. Lucas remembered hating that crown, not because he wanted it, but because it made Ethan look like the king of a kingdom Lucas never got to enter. He turned away from the photo and opened the hall closet, looking for the extra heating pad Helena recommended. But instead of the pad, he found a dusty shoebox marked middle school stuff, Ethan in blue marker. He hesitated, then sat on the floor and opened it. Inside were old notebooks, doodles of science experiments, school flyers, and a few stray Pokemon cards. Lucas sifted through half-heartedly until a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, slipped from between two books and landed in his lap. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Ethan's. From years ago, loopier, more careless. The top line read, "If I could be anyone, 8th grade English assignment." Lucas frowned and started reading. "If I could be anyone, I'd be my older brother, Lucas. He doesn't know it. But he's the strongest person I know. He never asks for help, even when he should. He can fix anything, bikes, radios, engines. And when I was little and scared of the dark, he sat with me without making fun of me. He just stayed, and that made it okay. He doesn't smile a lot, but when he does, it feels like you've earned it. People think he's quiet. I think he just knows not to waste words. If I could be anyone, I wouldn't want to be a superhero or a celebrity. I'd want to be like Lucas, because he's real. And he doesn't even know how much I look up to him." Lucas stared at the letter for a long time. His hands trembled slightly. This wasn't recent. It wasn't a post-accident confession or a guilt-driven compliment. This was Ethan, at 13, writing his heart into an assignment no one was supposed to read except a teacher. Lucas let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. All those years, thinking he was resented, ignored, resented back, he'd never once imagined Ethan had been looking up at him the whole time. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his hoodie pocket. He didn't need to show it to Ethan. He just needed to carry it. That night, over dinner, Ethan was quiet. His face was pale from exhaustion, and his right hand trembled slightly as he lifted a spoonful of soup. Lucas reached over and studied the bowl without a word. Ethan looked up surprised. Lucas gave him a small smile. "Tomorrow's gonna be better," he said. Ethan nodded. "It already is." Their father raised an eyebrow. "You two seem different lately." Sarah grinned. "In a good way." Ethan chuckled. "Lucas is secretly a softie. Don't let the boots and grease fool you." Lucas mock glared. "Keep talking, and I'll swap your protein shake with motor oil." The table erupted in laughter. But beneath it, something deeper hummed. Connection. Renewal. Forgiveness. Later that evening, as Lucas helped Ethan adjust the pillows before bed, Ethan looked at him and said, "Thanks for not giving up on me." Lucas tucked the blanket in around him. "Thanks for not giving up on me." Ethan smiled, sleepy but content. "Hey, remember when we used to build pillow forts in the living room? Only if you remember that you cried the first time it collapsed. I was 6. You were 10. Ethan laughed. And Lucas sat beside the bed, watching his brother's eyes drift shut. The letter burned gently in his pocket. He didn't need a spotlight. He just needed this. The quiet knowledge that he mattered. That he always had, even if he hadn't known it yet. Chapter 9. Limelight Again. The invitation came in a thick envelope, sealed with a gold crest. Lucas found it first. Tossed onto the kitchen counter like junk mail. He didn't think much of it until he noticed the return address, Sacramento State Science Foundation. He opened it. Inside was a formal letter addressed to Ethan. Dear Mr. Ethan Miller, we are pleased to invite you to the State Youth Innovators Symposium as a finalist. We understand you've recently experienced an injury and want to assure you will accommodate your needs fully. If you're able to attend, we would be honored to have you present your work. Lucas stared at the page, his stomach turning with an emotion he couldn't quite name. Pride? Fear? Maybe both. He placed the envelope on the table and went to find Ethan, who was in the living room practicing leg lifts with quiet determination, sweat beading along his hairline. Mail for you, Lucas said, tossing him the letter. Ethan opened it slowly. His eyes scanned the page, then widened. No way. Lucas folded his arms. Guess they don't care that you're on crutches. Ethan looked up. This is huge. Lucas nodded once. Yeah, but something in his chest ached. Over the next few days, preparations began. Ethan's teacher emailed with excitement. The foundation sent over presentation guidelines. And even Isabel texted to say she'd be there to cheer him on. Ethan's face glowed again. That same light Lucas had seen 1,000 times. But this time, it didn't burn to watch. It stung, yes. A quiet, dull ache. But not like before. It was like watching someone return home after a storm. You gonna wear a suit? Lucas asked one evening while they reviewed Ethan's prototype updates on his laptop. Maybe, Ethan said, if I can convince Mom not to make me wear the one from 8th grade graduation. Lucas smirked. Burn that thing. You looked like a penguin with a bow tie. Ethan chuckled. You came to that ceremony, right? Lucas hesitated. I did. But I left early. Couldn't take the crowd. Ethan nodded, understanding. Thanks for coming anyway. The morning of the symposium arrived cold and clear. Ethan wore a navy blazer, black jeans, and a deep green shirt that Isabel had apparently chosen. Lucas drove them to the venue in his old truck, carefully loading Ethan's wheelchair into the back. They arrived at the downtown convention center just after 9 a.m. Lucas helped Ethan into the wheelchair and pushed him toward the check-in tables. Cameras flashed. Volunteers bustled. Other students in crisp blazers carried trifold boards and laptops. Parents hovered nervously nearby. For a moment, Lucas wanted to turn around and drive home. But then he felt Ethan's hand tighten slightly on the armrest. Not out of fear, but out of steadying himself. Lucas leaned closer. You good? Ethan nodded. Yeah, just a little overwhelmed. Lucas smiled faintly. Welcome back to the limelight. Ethan glanced at him. This time, I know I'm not in it alone. The presentation was scheduled for 11:15. As the time drew near, Ethan grew quieter. He reviewed his slides, double-checked the demonstration gear, and wiped his palms on his pants more times than Lucas could count. Lucas stayed by his side. You need water? He asked. No, Ethan replied. Just a miracle. Lucas grinned. Already got one. You're here. Then the announcer called his name. Ethan rolled forward toward the stage. Lucas stayed in the wings. Arms crossed, every muscle in his body tensed like a spring. Ethan's voice began a little shaky, but it steadied quickly. He talked about neural impulse mapping, adaptive motion control, and the applications of his prosthetic design for children with limb differences. Lucas watched, mesmerized. Not just by the presentation, but by who Ethan had become. Stronger, wiser, more grounded. And part of that, Lucas realized, was because of him, not in spite of him. When Ethan returned backstage after a round of applause, Lucas helped him down the ramp. You killed it, he said, handing him a water bottle. Ethan took it, cheeks flushed. I think I blacked out halfway through. Lucas shook his head. Nah, you were solid. Confident. Like you'd been doing it forever. Ethan looked at him. I had a good coach. Lucas smirked. I'm more like a mechanic than a coach. But I'll take it. They stood in silence for a moment, the energy of the crowd still buzzing behind them. Then Ethan said, Thanks for letting me shine again, without trying to dim yourself. Lucas didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked toward the stage, then back at his brother. I'm starting to see, he said slowly, that light doesn't run out just because someone else has some. Maybe there's enough for both of us. Ethan smiled. There always was. Lucas nodded. And for the first time in his life, he believed it. Chapter 10, A Name in the Crowd. 2 days after the symposium, Ethan's name was trending, at least locally. The Sacramento Gazette ran a full article titled Inspiration on Wheels, Teen Inventor Overcomes Injury to Wow State Symposium. It featured a full-page photo of Ethan mid-presentation, his wheelchair partially visible beneath the edge of the table, and a pull quote in bold. Even with one leg healing, this young man is still miles ahead. The article had been shared across Facebook. The school's newsletter reposted it. Someone even submitted it to a teen science blog, and overnight, Ethan had gone from high school standout to small-town celebrity. Lucas sat at the kitchen counter, sipping his second coffee of the morning, watching the story spread like wildfire on his phone. The comments poured in. What a brave, brilliant kid. Can't believe he's only 17. That's the kind of student every school dreams of. Lucas didn't disagree. But something inside him stirred uncomfortably. The next few days were filled with phone calls. The school wanted to honor Ethan at a spring assembly. A local podcast invited him to talk about the accident and his invention. Someone from a Bay Area startup reached out with a student mentorship opportunity. And through it all, Ethan stayed humble. thoughtful and eager, but Lucas saw the familiar shine come back into his brother's eyes. That glow. That spotlight. Only now, Lucas wasn't angry at it. He just didn't know where he belonged anymore. One evening, after another round of emails and excited chatter from Ethan about mentorship and scholarships, Lucas found himself back in the garage. The old motorcycle sat in pieces where he'd last left it, half-finished wiring, a loose chain, a fuel tank that still needed sanding. Dust had started gathering on the workbench. It felt like a metaphor for his life. Incomplete. Forgotten. He sat on the stool and stared at the wall, where an old poster of a '72 Camaro hung crooked from a bent tack. He thought about the past few weeks. About the way he'd stepped up, driven Ethan, helped him through therapy, carried bags, fixed meals, learned to listen. He'd become the brother he'd never been. But now Ethan was moving forward again, toward the future. And Lucas felt like he was back where he started, static. Alone. Later that night, Ethan knocked gently on the garage door frame. "Can I come in?" Lucas looked up. "You're already here." Ethan walked in with his crutches, slow but steady. "Mom said you skipped dinner." "Wasn't hungry." Ethan didn't push. He just looked around at the scattered tools and half-assembled engine parts. "You haven't worked on this in a while." Lucas shrugged. "Didn't seem important." "It was to you," Ethan said quietly. Lucas set his wrench down. "Yeah, was." Silence. Then Ethan leaned on the workbench, his expression unreadable. "You ever think about going full-time into auto design?" he asked. "You're really good." "Like, actually gifted." Lucas scoffed. "Yeah, well, doesn't get you published in newspapers." Ethan frowned. "I didn't ask for that article." "I know. I'm not trying to make you feel small, Lucas." "I know." Ethan took a breath. "Then what is it?" Lucas looked at his brother, really looked at him. The kid with all the buzz and light and future ahead of him. The one who'd once written a middle school essay wishing to be him. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," Lucas admitted. "I spent weeks helping you. That gave me purpose. But you're walking again. Getting back to your life. You're moving on. And you think you're not?" Lucas hesitated. "I just feel left behind." Again. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Lucas didn't expect. "Come with me." Lucas blinked. "What?" "I've got that mentorship program starting in 2 months. In San Jose. But they said I could bring a design partner to help with the prototype scaling. It's for adaptive tech, mobility, prosthetics, automotive assistance. Stuff you could build in your sleep." Lucas stared at him. "They're not looking for degrees," Ethan added. "They're looking for people who know how to make things work." Lucas leaned back against the wall. "You really think I could do that?" "I know you can," Ethan said. "I've seen you do it." Lucas looked down at his hands, calloused, stained with grease. The same hands that had rebuilt carburetors, lifted his brother out of hospital beds, learned to hold instead of harm. Maybe they did have a future. He let out a slow breath. "I'll think about it." Ethan grinned. "That's all I'm asking." As he turned to leave, Lucas called out, "Hey!" Ethan turned back. "I'm proud of you." Ethan's face softened. "I'm proud of you too." Lucas smiled for real this time. Not bitter. Not forced. Just proud. Of both of them. Together. Chapter 11. A city built on second chances. The drive to San Jose took just under 2 hours, but to Lucas, it felt like crossing into another world. Gone were the sleepy rows of Sacramento houses, the familiarity of oil-stained pavement and corner diners. Here, towering glass buildings caught the morning light like shards of sky. Tesla's outnumbered trucks, and even the coffee shops had names like Sprocket and Bean and Voltage Roastery. Lucas parked his aging Chevy pickup in a compact car lot, earning a few puzzled stares, and stepped out into the buzz of the city. He didn't belong here. Not yet. But maybe soon. Ethan met him outside the Futura Tech Incubator, a sleek glass-paneled building with solar panels and an automated sliding door that opened with a whisper. He was leaning on his crutches, wearing a soft gray hoodie and a wide grin. "You made it," he said, as if he hadn't texted 3 times to confirm. Lucas gave a half smile. Tried turning around at least twice. You didn't, though, Ethan said. That counts for something. Inside. The building was everything Lucas had imagined he didn't deserve. Modern labs, robotic arms neatly aligned in charging ports, students buzzing around with 3D printed models and AR glasses. Ethan led him into a side room, where a mentor named Dr. Jia Lu, a robotics researcher in her 40s, greeted them. You must be Lucas, she said warmly. Ethan tells me you rebuilt a fuel injection system from scratch last year. Lucas blinked. Yeah, kind of. Don't be modest. He said you made it run better than stock specs. Lucas glanced at Ethan, who looked completely unashamed. Dr. Lu handed him a tablet. We're working on adapting lightweight materials for powered knee braces. I'd love to hear your input on torque tolerances. Lucas stared at the screen, fingers hovering. I'm not really. She cut in gently. No one here cares about diplomas as much as they care about thinking differently. Lucas swallowed and slowly began to scroll. And as he read through their schematics, something shifted. He understood it. Not just conceptually, viscerally. He could already see what was missing. Where the weight distribution was off. Where they'd over-engineered when they could simplify. He looked up. You're overloading the actuator mount. You don't need that many points of articulation if you use a curved linkage. Dr. Lu raised an eyebrow. Go on. Lucas leaned in. And for the next 10 minutes, he forgot the awkwardness. Forgot the doubts. He talked with his hands. Sketched on the whiteboard. He watched the lab assistant's jaw drop slightly. When he finally stopped, slightly breathless, he expected silence. Instead, Dr. Lu clapped once, laughing. Hire this man. Ethan grinned like he'd won the lottery. Lucas just blinked. Wait, you're serious? Dr. Lu nodded. We're offering short-term design fellowships to select attendees. If you're willing to come back next month, I'll reserve a spot for you. No forms. No frills. Just you, your hands, and your brain. Lucas didn't answer right away. Because something inside him, something that had never spoken up before, was whispering. You belong here. After the meeting, Lucas and Ethan grabbed lunch at a food truck park across the street. They sat at a picnic table under strings of Edison bulbs, both of them digging into bowls of teriyaki chicken and rice. Lucas was quiet. Ethan didn't push. Eventually, Lucas spoke. I think I forgot what it felt like to be good at something. You never stopped being good, Ethan said. You just stopped letting people see it. Lucas picked at his rice. I spent so long trying to take your light away, I didn't realize I had my own. Ethan smiled. That's the thing about light. It doesn't disappear. It just waits for you to stop hiding from it. Lucas laughed softly. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between crutch lessons and being yelled at by hospital nurses. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky turn soft gold above the buildings. Then Lucas asked, You think I'll screw it up? I think you'll surprise even yourself. Lucas looked down at his calloused hands, hands that had only known engines and grease. And for the first time, he saw something else. Potential. That night, back home in Sacramento, Lucas lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. He wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Ethan's success. Not of his own shadow. He pulled out his phone and texted Dr. Lu. I'm in. He didn't wait for a reply. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing someone else's path. He was building his own. Chapter 12, The Engine and the Echo. The morning after Lucas accepted the fellowship, he found himself back in the garage. But this time, it wasn't to escape anything. It was to build. He pulled the old motorcycle frame forward under the hanging bulb, wiped the layer of dust from the seat, and rolled up his sleeves. There was no crowd, no article, no spotlight waiting for him. Just bolts and wires. And peace. He turned on the radio, some local rock station playing an old Fleetwood Mac track, and got to work. His hands moved like they remembered. Muscle memory kicked in. Clean. Confident. Efficient. He didn't realize how much time had passed until the sun shifted across the workbench and a voice behind him said, You always did work best in silence. Lucas turned. His father, Daniel, stood in the doorway. He was in his weekend clothes, worn jeans, a faded UC Davis hoodie, and that same calm expression he always wore like a uniform. Lucas straightened. "Didn't hear you come in." Daniel stepped closer, nodding toward the engine. "Still running on the twin-cylinder setup?" Lucas gave a short laugh. "Still trying to make it run at all." Daniel crouched beside the bike, inspecting it without touching. "Looks like you're halfway there." Lucas hesitated, then asked quietly, "Did you know Ethan nominated me for that program?" Daniel looked up surprised. "I didn't. But I'm not." Lucas leaned against the wall. "I don't know. I always figured no one expected much from me." Daniel frowned. "Why would you think that?" Lucas swallowed. "Because when people talked about our family, they talked about Ethan. The genius. The leader. The future of engineering. I was just the guy who knew how to fix things." Daniel was silent for a long time. Then he said something Lucas hadn't expected. "When you were 10, you disassembled the lawnmower because the starter wouldn't catch. I came outside ready to yell, and instead found you lining the parts up by type. You fixed it. No help. No manual." Lucas remembered that day. He hadn't thought anyone else did. Daniel stood. "You think we didn't see you, Lucas? But we did. We just didn't know how to tell you." Lucas's throat tightened. Daniel went on. "You've got hands that solve problems, a brain that sees what others miss, and a heart that, whether you know it or not, has held this family together more than once." Lucas looked away, blinking fast. "I spent a lot of years thinking I had to compete with Ethan," he said finally. "But now I just want to grow alongside him. Maybe even ahead in my own way." Daniel smiled, the kind of smile that came slow and stayed long. "You already are." He stepped back toward the door. "Let me know if you want help with the chain alignment later. I'm still decent with a wrench." Lucas smirked. "Only if you bring the good coffee." "Deal." And then, just like that, his father was gone. But something lingered in the garage. Not the smell of oil. Not the echo of footsteps. But the quiet affirmation of something Lucas had long been missing. Validation. Later that evening, Ethan wheeled into the garage, balancing 2 mugs of hot cocoa. He passed one to Lucas, who was now elbow-deep in rewiring the headlight. "So," Ethan said, blowing on the surface of his drink, "I hear you and Dad had a moment." Lucas didn't look up. "He talked to you?" "Nope," Ethan replied. "But he doesn't bring cocoa to just anyone." Lucas chuckled. "It wasn't a moment. Just a conversation that took 15 years to start." Ethan raised his cup. "To overdue conversations." Lucas clinked his mug against Ethan's. "And to not waiting so long for the next ones." They sipped in silence. Outside, the sun dipped behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the driveway. But inside the garage, the light stayed on. And for the first time in years, so did Lucas. He was no longer standing in someone else's spotlight. He was building his own. One bolt, one word, one choice at a time. Chapter 13. The Farewell We Never Practiced. The suitcase sat by the door like an unspoken sentence. It wasn't big, just enough for clothes, tools, and a stack of notebooks that Lucas had finally filled with sketches and diagrams of his own designs. For once, he had more than old engine specs and repair manuals. He had ideas. His bus to San Jose left at 10 a.m. It was now 8:17, and Lucas was pacing the hallway, unsure if he should go over the checklist for the 3rd time or just sit down and feel everything that was suddenly too loud in his chest. Ethan rolled up beside him in his wheelchair, balancing a bag of granola bars in his lap and a folded note. "Don't forget snacks," Ethan said. "You get cranky when you're hungry." Lucas took the bag with a raised eyebrow. "I get quiet." "Same thing to the rest of us." Lucas smirked, then looked down at the note. "What's this?" Ethan shrugged. "Open it when you get there." Lucas hesitated before slipping it into his jacket pocket. "You're starting to sound like Mom. You know that?" "Good," Ethan replied. "She's got better instincts than we do." They both laughed softly but easily, like brothers who had learned to stop measuring every word. After a moment, Ethan sobered. "You nervous?" Lucas nodded. "Yeah, a little." It's been a long time since I tried to build something for myself. Ethan looked down, turning one of the wheels absently. I used to think I had to lead the way. Be the example. Make you proud. Lucas blinked. You wanted to make me proud? Ethan looked up, his gaze steady. Always. Lucas swallowed hard. The words sat heavy in his throat, not painful, just big. The kind of words that couldn't be rushed. You did, he said quietly. You always did. Even when I didn't know how to show it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was sacred. A full circle moment. The kind that doesn't need decoration. Ethan glanced at the clock. You've got 20 minutes before Mom starts crying and packing another suitcase just in case. Lucas chuckled. Yeah, better go. He reached for the suitcase and rolled it toward the door. Ethan followed, slower, careful not to bump the walls. At the threshold, Lucas turned back. I don't know what this'll turn into, he said. The program. The work. But I want to make something that matters. Something people use. Something people remember. Ethan nodded. You will. Lucas studied his younger brother, the one who'd once been the light he tried to snuff out, and was now the fire that helped him see. You're the reason I'm going, Lucas said, voice low. Not because you made me feel small, but because you showed me I don't have to stay that way. Ethan's eyes glistened. He didn't try to speak. He just reached out a hand. Lucas shook it, then pulled him in for a quick, rough hug. It was awkward. One-armed. A little too tight. It was perfect. The bus pulled away exactly on time. Ethan stood on the curb, watching it disappear down the road. He held a paper cup of coffee and the quiet pride of someone who had finally let go, not to lose, but to lift. Lucas sat near the back, headphones in, fingers nervously drumming against his knee. Once the city blurred into trees and overpasses, he pulled the note from his pocket and opened it. It read, Don't try to be me. Don't try to outshine me. Be you. That's who I looked up to from the start. I love you. E. Lucas stared out the window, the words etched into him like engine grooves. No more shadows. No more comparison. Just the open road. And finally, his turn at the wheel. Chapter 14. Miles apart, heart aligned. The San Jose sky was different. Lucas had noticed it on the second morning of the program, sipping bitter black coffee from a vending machine and staring out the fourth-floor window of the Futura Tech Incubator. It wasn't just the color pale blue, streaked with low-hanging clouds, it was the feeling of it. Like it wasn't pressing down. It was inviting him up. He tapped his fingers along the work table's edge as the mentor group gathered. Each participant had brought something, diagrams, sketches, half-built prototypes. Some of the students spoke in high-speed tech lingo. Lucas didn't. He just waited for his turn, then rolled forward the demo chassis he'd welded at midnight in the workshop garage. No buzzwords. Just clean lines, intentional joints, and a tension system that redistributed weight across the whole brace frame. It was deceptively simple. And quietly brilliant. Dr. Jia Lu walked around the model, nodding slowly. Where did you study mechanical load distribution like this? Lucas scratched the back of his neck. My high school lawnmower. The group chuckled. But Dr. Lu didn't. She looked directly at him. You don't just build. You understand. That's rarer than you think. Lucas had heard praise before. But not like this. Not from someone who didn't know his brother. Who wasn't comparing. Who saw him, just him. For the first time, Lucas smiled without second-guessing it. He felt the truth land inside him. I belong here. Back in Sacramento, Ethan stood barefoot in the living room. His physical therapist, Helena, knelt beside him, double-checking the tension of the leg brace. His crutches were off to the side. This was the moment. The first unassisted step. Helena looked up at him. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to try. Ethan nodded. He inhaled deeply, focused his weight, and shifted forward. The first foot landed shakily. The second followed. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't smooth. But it was real. And it was his. Sarah gasped softly from the kitchen, her hands covering her mouth. Daniel whispered irreverent, That's my boy. Ethan smiled, not just from the triumph of the moment, but from the memory of what had brought him here. Lucas, the brother who once refused to clap, is now the reason he could stand. He turned to the side table and picked up his phone. One missed call from Lucas. One photo message. A blurry workshop selfie, grease-streaked forehead, proud grin. Caption. Told you I'd surprise myself. Ethan grinned and typed back. I walked today. No crutches. We're both building something now, huh? That night, in two cities, two young men sat under different skies. One surrounded by design prototypes and soldering tools. The other, still sore but smiling, practicing standing between the doorframe and the couch. And somewhere in the space between them, between the old bitterness and the new beginning, there was peace. Not the kind you beg for. The kind you earn. Together. Chapter 15, Homecoming. The moment Lucas stepped off the plane at Sacramento International Airport, a wave of memories hit him, childhood streets, family dinners. Long summer evenings spent fixing bikes in the garage. But this time, it felt different. He wasn't the lost shadow anymore. He was someone who had found his light. His phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Welcome home. Can't wait to see what you've built. Lucas smiled. Outside, Ethan waited with their mom's old car, the same one they used to pile into for weekend drives. His wheelchair was folded in the trunk, but Lucas could see the slight limp in Ethan's step as he approached. Look at you, Lucas said, pulling him into a warm hug. Walking on your own. Ethan grinned, catching his breath. I told you I'd surprise you. They drove home through familiar neighborhoods, sharing stories. Laughing like brothers who'd finally stopped competing and started understanding. At the house, Daniel greeted them at the door with a firm handshake and a rare smile of pride. Good to have you back. Lucas, he said simply. Inside, Sarah prepared dinner, filling the kitchen with warmth and the smell of fresh herbs. Later, Lucas found himself in the garage, their old refuge. He ran his hands over the workbench, the tools, the engine parts he'd once considered his only friends. But now, standing beside him was Ethan, steady and smiling. Want to see what I've been working on? Lucas asked. Ethan nodded eagerly. Together. They pulled out blueprints and prototypes, projects combining Lucas's mechanical skill and Ethan's innovative design. The garage wasn't a shadow anymore. It was a spotlight. And for the first time, they stood side by side in its glow. Chapter 16, Building Bridges. The morning sun filtered through the garage windows, casting long beams of light across the cluttered workbench. Lucas and Ethan stood shoulder to shoulder, blueprints spread out before them, their faces illuminated not just by the warm glow but by the fresh energy of shared purpose. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, a little nervous but excited. All right, so this is the frame design for the adaptive mobility device. I've tweaked the torque distribution based on what we tested at the incubator. Ethan nodded, eyes scanning the sketches. And I've refined the sensor array layout. We want to make sure it responds intuitively to muscle signals, but stays lightweight. They fell into rhythm quickly, Lucas explaining mechanical details, Ethan sharing feedback on user experience. It was a dance of strengths, each filling the gaps in the other's knowledge. But just as the afternoon light began to wane, a disagreement sparked. Lucas frowned at one of Ethan's suggestions. If we cut the sensor nodes here, we risk losing accuracy. Ethan shook his head. But the weight savings would improve comfort. If it's too heavy, no one will want to wear it. Lucas sighed. Comfort is important, but reliability is everything. We can't sacrifice function for feel. Ethan crossed his arms. It's not a sacrifice if it makes the device usable. You're thinking like a mechanic. I'm thinking like the person who'll have to wear it every day. The tension hung thick for a moment. Lucas softened. I get that. But I'm worried if it breaks. It won't matter how comfortable it is. Ethan met his gaze. I'm worried if it's uncomfortable. It won't matter how strong it is. They both laughed, a little awkwardly but with relief. The argument wasn't about winning, but learning. Lucas extended his hand. Let's find a middle ground. Ethan shook it firmly. Together. Days turned into weeks as they prototyped, tested, and iterated. They celebrated small wins, a sensor that responded perfectly, a joint that moved smoothly, and endured setbacks like snapped wires and misaligned parts. Through it all, their bond deepened beyond blood. They became teammates, confidants, and friends. One evening, as they reviewed the final model, Lucas smiled. "Remember when I used to want to trip you up?" Ethan grinned. "Yeah, crazy times." Lucas chuckled. "I'm glad we got past that." Ethan nodded. "Me too. I don't know where I'd be without you." Lucas looked at his brother, the boy who once seemed untouchable but was now his equal. "Here's to us," Lucas said, raising an imaginary glass. "To us," Ethan echoed, grinning. The garage was no longer just a place to fix broken machines. It was where two brothers rebuilt their future. Chapter 17, Trial by Fire. The morning of the prototype demonstration arrived crisp and clear, but Lucas felt a familiar knot in his stomach. Standing beside Ethan at the community center, he glanced at the crowd gathering, patients, therapists, local investors, and curious onlookers. "This is it," Ethan whispered, squeezing Lucas's shoulder. Lucas nodded, swallowing his nerves. "Let's do this." They wheeled the adaptive mobility device into the center of the room. Ethan stepped in, adjusting the brace carefully as Lucas monitored the control unit. Cameras clicked. Questions flew from the audience, and Ethan began moving slow, deliberate steps at first, then faster, smoother. The crowd responded with cheers and applause. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then, with a sudden jerk, the device faltered. A sensor misread caused the brace to lock briefly, causing Ethan to stumble. Gasps rippled through the room. Lucas's heart pounded. "Are you okay?" he asked urgently. Ethan nodded, catching his balance. "Yeah, just a glitch." Lucas quickly accessed the control panel, diagnosing the error. "It's the sensor calibration. I missed a step during the last update." Ethan gave him a reassuring smile. "We'll fix it." After a brief pause, Ethan tried again. Moving confidently through a short obstacle course designed to mimic everyday challenges. The device responded flawlessly. Relief flooded Lucas. After the demonstration, several therapists approached, impressed and eager to collaborate. One woman, Ms. Patel, said, "You two have something special here. I'd love to connect you with patients who can provide ongoing feedback." Lucas and Ethan exchanged glances, pride shining in their eyes. Later that evening, as they packed up equipment, Lucas admitted, "I was terrified when it failed." Ethan laughed. "Me too. But you fixed it. That's what matters." Lucas smiled, feeling the weight of every challenge they'd overcome. "This is just the beginning," he said. Ethan nodded. Together. Chapter 18, When the Circuit Breaks. The days following the demonstration were a whirlwind. Emails from therapists, invitations to local expos, and growing interest from potential collaborators. But with the excitement came pressure and unforeseen challenges. One afternoon, as Lucas and Ethan worked late in the garage converting feedback into improvements, Lucas's phone buzzed. A message from their mother. "Dinner's ready. Come eat before it gets cold." Lucas looked over at Ethan, who was adjusting the brace's new sensor array. "I'm starving," he said, standing up and stretching. Ethan smiled tiredly. "Me too. Let's take a break." At dinner, conversation was light at first, but then their father's tone shifted. "I heard from one of my colleagues that these kinds of projects can take years before they're really viable." Sarah added gently, "It's important to be patient. It's a marathon, not a sprint." Lucas nodded, but inside, doubt crept in. Was this just a pipe dream? Could they really pull this off? That night, Lucas sat alone in the garage, the hum of the street outside the only sound. He stared at the circuit board in his hand, the one that had failed during the demo. He thought of the stumble on stage, the gasps from the crowd, the fear that it could happen again. But then his phone buzzed, a message from Ethan. "Remember when you taught me to fix that old bike chain? This is the same. One link at a time." Lucas smiled, heart steadying. He called Ethan. "Let's get this fixed. Together." Over the next weeks, they faced setbacks, broken components, delayed funding, moments when frustration almost won. But each failure was met with renewed determination. Ethan said, "We're more than just builders. We're problem solvers." Lucas replied, "And sometimes, the biggest problem is believing we can." Together, they rebuilt circuits, refined software, and learned to lean on each other in new ways. One evening, as they closed the garage door, Lucas looked at Ethan and said, "This isn't just about the device anymore. It's about us." Ethan smiled. "About trust. About family." Lucas nodded. "About finally stepping out of the shadows and standing side by side." They clasped hands, no longer rivals, no longer distant brothers, but partners forging a shared future. Chapter 19. Under the Spotlight. The invitation came unexpectedly. An email from the California Innovation Expo, one of the largest showcases for emerging technologies on the West Coast. Lucas read it aloud as they sat in the garage, surrounded by prototypes and blueprints. "Dear Ethan and Lucas Miller, we are thrilled to invite you to present your adaptive mobility device at the upcoming California Innovation Expo. Your work represents the kind of breakthrough innovation we aim to highlight." Ethan's eyes sparkled. "This is huge." Lucas nodded, but felt a flicker of anxiety. "The bigger the stage, the bigger the pressure." Ethan smiled. "We've been through worse. Remember the demo glitch?" Lucas chuckled. "Yeah, that wasn't exactly my finest moment." They spent days preparing, refining their presentation, rehearsing answers to potential questions, and ensuring the device was flawless. The day of the expo arrived in a whirl of lights, cameras, and curious crowds. Their booth was busy from the start, visitors impressed by the device's sleek design and practical function. Journalists snapped photos, investors asked detailed questions. Lucas noticed Ethan handled the spotlight effortlessly, answering with calm confidence. But as the day wore on, Lucas felt the familiar pang of invisibility. Many visitors directed their praise toward Ethan, the charismatic face of their project. Lucas's contributions went unnoticed. That evening, as they packed up, Lucas couldn't hold back. "I don't want to be invisible again," he admitted quietly. Ethan looked surprised. "You're not invisible to me." Lucas sighed. "That's not what I mean. Out there, it's like you're the only one people see." Ethan thought for a moment. "Maybe it's time we share the spotlight differently." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "What if," Ethan continued, "we take turns leading presentations? Or start a vlog, so people hear both our stories?" Lucas smiled, feeling a warmth he hadn't in years. "Sounds like a plan." In the days that followed, they launched a joint social media channel, sharing behind-the-scenes footage, engineering tips, and personal stories. The response was immediate and positive. People connected not only with their invention, but with their journey, two brothers overcoming years of rivalry to build something meaningful together. That night, Lucas sat with Ethan under the fading glow of the garage lights. "We're doing more than building devices," Lucas said softly. "We're building trust," Ethan replied. Lucas nodded. "And that's the hardest project of all." They shared a look, full of unspoken promises. The spotlight wasn't just on their invention anymore. It was shining on them. Together. Chapter 20. Together in the Light. The community center was packed. Friends, family, mentors, and supporters gathered to celebrate Lucas and Ethan's journey, from a fractured family to a groundbreaking partnership. The adaptive mobility device stood proudly on display, its sleek design a testament to countless hours of hard work, setbacks, and breakthroughs. Lucas stood beside Ethan, both wearing matching navy blazers, their smiles genuine and steady. As Ethan took the stage to give the opening speech, Lucas watched the crowd, faces filled with hope and admiration. When it was his turn, Lucas stepped forward. He cleared his throat and began. "I used to believe I lived in someone else's shadow, that no matter how hard I worked, I'd never be seen. But through this journey, I've learned that the light isn't a limited resource. It grows when shared." He looked at Ethan. "And that brother, my friend, my teammate, he showed me how to step into the light together." The applause filled the room. Later, as the crowd mingled and laughter echoed, Lucas caught Ethan's eye. Remember when we couldn't stand each other? Ethan laughed. Feels like a lifetime ago. Lucas nodded. I'm grateful for that past. Though, because without it, I wouldn't know the value of what we have now. Ethan smiled. Here's to the future. They raised their glasses, no longer rivals, no longer in the shadows. Just two brothers, shining side by side.